Joining me now is Father Dave Dwyer, host of the Busted Halo show on Sirius XM. Father, thank you for being here this evening. You know, sometimes you just, Laura. Good evening, you can't make some of these things up when you hear this, right? But I wonder, are you and were you insulted by the image posted by the president? I mean, what are you hearing from other members of the church?
Well, I've certainly heard people that are offended, and rightly so. One of my reactions, and I think many inside the church, including, I would dare say, even Pope Leo, would be, I would prefer it if people were as offended by some of the moral atrocities that are going on. What Pope Leo spoke out against on Saturday, the fact that we're trying to integrate entertainment and religion by justifying war is completely unconscionable. That's what he's offended by. I mean, I'm glad that there's some uproar. I wish that the uproar was also about some of the more reprehensible things that are going on in the world.
Well, let's go there, Father, because just a few moments before posting that image, the president criticized Pope Leo, telling him to, quote, focus on being a great pope, not a politician. You had Vice President J.D. Vance, a noted Catholic, taking up a similar message today. Listen to this.
We certainly have a good relationship with the Vatican, but we're also going to disagree on substantive questions from time to time. I think that's a totally reasonable thing. I certainly think that in some cases, it would be best for the Vatican to stick to matters of morality, to stick to matters of what's going on in the Catholic Church, and let the President of the United States stick to dictating American public policy.
One could argue that was exactly what the Pope was talking about,
in fact,
matters of morality.
I would argue. Morality, yes.
Go on, Father.
No, Laura, you've hit it right on the head. I would concur with Vice President Vance that the Pope should stick to morality. And what the Pope has been saying consistently, really since the very beginning of his pontificate, is that we need to, in every possible way, work towards peace, work towards dialogue, work towards reconciliation, because war, as he put it just on Saturday at a global peace vigil that he held from St. Peter's, enough of this war, enough of everything that focuses so much on us, on greed, on selfishness, enough of this. All of that is about morality. In fact, the Catechism of the Catholic Church says that indiscriminate destruction of entire cities, not even just nations, but cities or areas of people without conscience is a violation of the law of God and should be, it says in the Catechism, it should be unequivocally denounced. Well, that's what Pope Leo has been doing, and I find I'm not surprised what Vice President Vance says. I've heard it from a lot of people. I've heard it from parishioners when I say something in the pulpit and they say, "Hey, you priests should stay out of politics." You know what I find, Laura? That at least anecdotally, 100% of the time, people say that when it's not their politics that is being preached about.
Really profound and one perhaps not unexpected. I want to play for our audience to give greater context, because here's how Pope Leo himself responded to all of what transpired.
I have no fear of neither the Trump administration nor speaking out loudly about the message of the gospel. And that's what I believe. I am called to do what the church is called to do. We're not politicians. We're not looking to make foreign policies with the same perspective that he might understand it. But I do believe in the message of the gospel. Blessed are the peacemakers. It's a message that the world needs to hear.
I was particularly struck by his idea of the perspective when it comes to foreign policy, obviously a term normally associated with politics, but certainly the idea of the gospel, his interpretation of how it applies to the interrelationship between countries, people, communities, humanity. How do you think he handled his reaction and the perhaps growing rift with President Trump?
Well, and that was an off-the-cuff remark on the plane, what he had said in much more crafted language over the weekend at a prayer service where he and probably others helped put together language of a homily and of an official statement. What he really decried was when people use religion and particularly Christianity to justify war. And he says, stop dragging God's name into this business of death. God is the author of life. And so in reacting on the plane, in fact, the reporter was telling him what the president had tweeted and said, he said you're a bad at foreign policy. He said you're weak on crime. And he said you're afraid of the Trump administration, which is actually the first time that Pope Leo has ever even said publicly the name of the president. He said, I'm neither afraid of the Trump administration nor of speaking out boldly. So I've heard a lot of people saying, well, now it's a spat and they're going back and forth. And there's a very difference between what we would call in the church ad hominem, attacking the person, and talking about policies and morality.
So illuminating. Father Dave Dwyer, thank you so much.
Sure.